Hey, what's up, guys? It's Matt Modai with OddsJam. And what we're going to do in this video, we're going to talk about the AFC Conference winner. Obviously, this is football. I'm talking about the AFC Conference winner, finding some value and some best bets. So, what I have up on the screen here now is the OddsJam page that just lists the future odds of every sports book and then the team. So, no surprise, Bills Chiefs number one and two, excuse me. Chargers being number three, I did think was interesting. The Bengals, despite the fact that they were just in the Super Bowl, not even in the top five, which I thought was interesting. Other than that, not much to gather just from the odds themselves in terms of the order of them. What is interesting is finding value in these spots. So if you're just looking at this blindly, you're probably thinking Chiefs at plus 600, that's probably pretty good. Chargers at plus 850, that's probably pretty good. Same thing with the Broncos. Actually, that's not necessarily true. What you need to do to determine whether one of these future bets has good value or not is you need to remove the VIG of the pinnacle line. So whenever we're betting a positive EV bet, not a future, we are removing the VIG, right? That's what these odds here are for, no VIG odds. Well, that's actually something that you can do in futures markets too. It's a little more complicated, but it can be done. And that's exactly what I did here on this AFC champion spreadsheet. So it's a lot of math, a lot of numbers, which I'm sure looks confusing upon first glance, but hopefully I can dumb it down enough for you for it to make sense. If not, if you do have any questions, let me know. Comment on the video with questions. You can hit me up on Twitter with any questions as well. But let's jump into it. So basically what I did was I used the pinnacle odds and then a bunch of formulas to determine the fair odds. And I'll go one by one and talk about each column just so you can kind of understand what we're looking at here. Number one, this hold percentage of 20% is just, it's ludicrous. That's an insane hold on the market. If you don't know what that means, that's basically a 20% juice that they're charging for the futures odds as a whole. To put that in context, a normal spread, a normal total, minus 110 on each way, that has a hold percent, 4.75%. 20 cents in market with hold percentage of 4.75%. We see on the futures odds a hold of 20%. So that just details why it's so important to remove the VIG and just get the implied odds of each one of these individually. So basically what I did here was I pulled the implied percentage, and this was pretty easy. All you need to do is just a formula. It's just 100% divided by 100% plus the pinnacle odds. So in this case, we got 21% for the Bills specifically. So if you add all these together, if you sum, you see this number here, this is where we get the 20% from. If you add up all of the implied odds for each team, we get a sum of 120%. That's where you get the 20% hold from. Then from there, what you can do is find the fair win percentage of each of these teams. And all you need to do there is just divide the implied percentage by the sum of the all of the implied percentage. So for this one, it's 21.65% divided by 120. 21 divided by 120, essentially. You do that for each of them, and you can get the fair win percent of each team. You know this was done right when the sum equals 100%. That's when you know that you've done it right, because you're removing the VIG and you're finding out the true odds, and the true odds of each one should always add up to 100%. Like if you remove the VIG on just a standard play here, these odds will always add up. The no VIG odds will always add up to 100%. It's the same thing for the fair win percentage. And then from there, you can find the fair odds. It's just another formula. You do 1 minus the percent, divide that by some numbers. You don't really need to understand how to do it, just that it's already done. And that's exactly what this column is here. So column G on the screen here has all of the fair odds for each team. So the Bills, that plus 350, no longer looking like a value. The Chiefs, that plus 500, no longer looking like a value, so on and so forth. So the last thing I did, and this is the most simple, just did a simple if statement. If this number is greater than the fair odds number, put a yes. And we can see, what's this? The top 7 teams, there's no value on betting their future. The hold percent is too high on the top 7 teams, which tells me that if you are going to bet a future on one of the AFC teams, you had better luck betting on some sort of outlier team as opposed to one of the favorites. So looks like the first team that does have favorable odds are the Texans. Points bet at the Browns, not the Texans, the Browns. Plus 1,800 on points bet. I don't want to get into the Browns situation. It just is upsetting to me. But I can tell you, I'm not touching the Browns. I'm not touching them. I'm not getting into it. If you want to bet on the value of the Browns at plus 1,800, by all means, I will not do it. I won't root for them. I will root heavily against them, and we'll end it there. The next team that does have some value is the Patriots. So not a huge value going from the fair odds plus 2,000 all the way up to plus 2,400 on FanDuel. And then if you think Doug Peterson can work, excuse me, this is PointsBet, sorry. PointsBet. Actually, I mean, all of these teams, no, DraftKings has the best odds. Sorry, I'm losing my mind. DraftKings has the best odds at plus 2,500. I am unfortunately unable to use my DraftKings account as of right now. Just getting some, I recently moved, getting some location issues figured out. You guys don't need to be bored with that. But if you did want to put some on the Patriots at plus 2,500, I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. Bet $100, win 2,500, excuse me, or put $10, win 250. I do think it's worth sprinkling a little bit on the Patriots. For handicapping reasons, if I'm just thinking about this as a football fan, I kind of think the Patriots were a little overrated last year. They had a really good point differential, but if you look at their schedule, they just pummeled the bad teams. They beat the Jaguars by like 45. All they really did was beat up on the bad teams, and they struggled a little bit against the good teams. Now, beating bad teams is a mark of a good team. So I'm not saying that the Patriots are bad. I just don't necessarily think they have enough to make it to the Super Bowl. I would be surprised if they made it even far in the playoffs. If they made it to the second or third round of the playoffs, I would be surprised. Mac Jones did have a good rookie year. I don't necessarily think he has another leap to go. And I just don't necessarily think the Patriots squad is good enough around him. But I am certainly not one to go against math. I work for OddsJam for a reason because I'm a positive EV sports bettor. So I do think, again, this is something that is worth putting money on. Like a unit at most, $25, whatever your unit size is, just put one on the Patriots. If you wanted to sprinkle some on the Jags at plus 6,600 on BetMGM, maybe Doug Peterson can work some magic with Trevor Lawrence. That's possible. Crazier things probably not actually have happened. And just looking through in general, so the Bills go from, they're still a favorite, right, at 18%. If we're just looking as a whole on the futures market in general, so there's a bunch of different tier breaks, right? The Bills are in a tier of their own. No other team is really even close to them. There's a 5% gap between the Bills and the Chiefs, who are the next best team. Then, if you go to the Chiefs, so there's a tier gap after 1. There's a tier gap after 2 with the Chiefs at 13%. They're the only 2 teams above 10%. There's no team even close to the Chiefs, really, aside from obviously the Bills, who are ahead of them. And then there's 2 teams clumped together, Chargers and Broncos. Then there's a couple teams clumped together with the Browns at the highest of all of them. And then there's another tier break from there. So I always find this fascinating, looking at the percent chance of stuff when, baking into baking out the percent from the fair odds. The Bills being the heavy favorite makes sense to me. Just thinking about that one from a handicapping perspective. I mean, they should have probably, if they don't just wet their pants in the last 13 seconds against the Chiefs, they probably win the Super Bowl. That team is loaded. I will say what makes me the most nervous is them losing their offensive coordinator. Brian Dable went from the Bills offensive coordinator, now is head coach of the Giants. He was essentially the architect of that entire offense. So the person that they replaced him with, Coy Detmer, he was a quarterbacks coach for a couple years. Ken Dorsey was a quarterbacks coach for the past couple years for the Bills. It's supposed to keep the same offense. It's supposed to keep humming. We don't know. From the outside, we never know how much importance a coach has and what it's going to be like to replace them. That would be the only thing that makes me nervous. The Chiefs, every year Patrick Mahomes has played football. He's gone at least to the AFC Championship game. They should have won it last year if they didn't blow that lead against the Bengals. They should have won it the year before if for his first year if D4 didn't line up offside. So the Chiefs are just a machine. We don't know what they look like without Tyreek Hill. I think that's going to be something that's interesting to see. So I understand why these top 2 teams are overvalued and why there isn't really value all the way down until the Browns or the Patriots. So regardless, if you're going to put money on a team, I recommend a little bit, like unit at most, on the Patriots. If you want to take the Browns, I'm not going to stop you. I certainly will not do it. I won't support them. And other than that, I don't really see any value on the top 7 teams. And that's what I find so fascinating about removing the VIG. So what the whole point of this video is not to pick winners. If I just thought hey, what's the team, like my prediction, the team that has the best chance, I would take the Bills, and you wouldn't really need to do much thought into it. But taking out the odds, taking out the VIG and finding the fair odds, we found some value on the Patriots. And that's going to be it. That's going to be everything. So if you have any questions, again, let me know. Comment on the video with any questions. Hopefully it all made sense for you. I hope it wasn't too confusing. But that's it. So I appreciate you guys watching, and have a good one.